My brain fog would clear, a flip would switch in my head, and I was typing, I was writing, I was getting it done. Everyone's a little ADHD. That's like telling somebody who's handicapped that like everyone's a little handicapped. Like, what? You can tell how severe someone's ADHD is based on how they act around you. All right, now it's time to address some assumptions about ADHD and people with ADHD. I have a list of ADHD assumptions written down, and we're gonna go through them because some of them I've like heard before and I kind of expected. Others I'm just like I was just really shocked. Um, but nonetheless, let's get into it. Okay, so for the first assumption, ADHD is caused by poor parental discipline. No, no, no. You guys, I think one of the reasons that I went undiagnosed for so long, besides the fact that I didn't know what ADHD was, is because I had very, very strong parental discipline. I was very supervised as a kid. I don't even think like, okay, prior to college, I never attended a high school party that wasn't at school. Like, I never went partying. I never got drunk. I never did any of those things. I think the only thing I could do was like surf the internet and like read a book. Like that's really all I had to do when I wasn't at school. Um, I had like a couple friends that I could go over to their house and spend time with, but definitely not on the week. And it was it was very strict in our household. When I first found out I had ADHD, my parents were still in denial. Like even after I was diagnosed, it wasn't until I think I started the medication that I started to notice like the differences, and they started to notice it, that they really like were like, okay, like this is a thing. But it was because I didn't like I I wasn't a bad student growing up. I did my homework. I got it done. And let me be very clear. I got it done. How I got it done was a mess. I never really had any structure in terms of like studying. I basically did things when like my brain allowed me to. And by that I mean when I could hyper focus. Um, Otherwise it was not possible. Like when I say it's not possible, like I could sit down and like try to work, but I would get distracted way more than if I had just waited till I could hyper focus. Which is what I did without really knowing I was doing it. I just knew that when push came to shove and that deadline was approaching, you guys, the anxiety would kick in, and honey, I would get that done. Like my brain fog would, whatever it was, my brain fog would clear, a flip would switch in my head, and I was typing, I was writing, I was getting it done. Like I was reading. I did not have any missing assignments unless I legitimately forgot that I had an assignment. There was nothing that I knew of that like I missed, because there were consequences for missed assignments. So no, ADHD is not caused by um, poor parental discipline. This by far shocked me the most, because I'm just like, there's no way it could have been stricter. Like there's nothing else that they could have taken away like that would have made me a better student. That's why I think this is so funny. On to the next assumption. Oh my god. The second one, oh, nothing triggers me when people say things like everyone is a little ADHD. It Everyone's a little ADHD. That's like telling somebody who's handicapped that like everyone's a little handicapped. Like, what? Okay, like you can choose to sit in a wheelchair, but it doesn't make you handicapped. Or like sometimes you can like sprain your ankle and like have to be confined to a wheelchair. But does that mean that like your handicap is the same as someone who literally can't walk's handicap? It's just it's frustrating and wrong. It's so rude. I think it's so rude. I don't know. It's just Ooh, I don't like that. Anyways, I'm moving on because there's nothing to say here. It sounds ridiculous. The third assumption is that ADHD is a collection of symptoms. I think the way this is worded was that like it's just a collection of symptoms. And I have an issue with this because one, it's not just like a random set of like symptoms. A lot of these symptoms are related to specific parts of the brain and like specific functions that are supposed to be working together to create a certain level of functionality. And so even though it just seems like random symptoms, when you look at like where in the brain or in the body or like is responsible for these symptoms, it makes sense that they're all interconnected and all related. Yes, you can have a couple of these symptoms once in a while, but when you're experiencing that on like a consistent daily or even like anything like that basis, then like, and it's impeding on your ability to function otherwise, then it's a problem. The next assumption is that people with ADHD don't need accommodations. This is a tough one for me because one of my regrets, if I have any, honestly, there's nothing I could have done. Like, if I was able to have this knowledge earlier, I would get diagnosed earlier, because I think that the accommodations would have made a big difference in my like academic life. Oh, it would have made a world of difference. Just for example, just having notes ahead of time before the lecture. Having those lecture notes ahead of time would have been amazing, because then I could look at the notes and focus on understanding the material as much as I can before I go into the lecture and listen to the professor. I found even before I knew I had ADHD, I knew I always struggled with my upper level science courses, because like I found it very hard to take notes and listen to what they're saying as I'm jotting it down, and also at the same time be able to manipulate the information and understand what they're talking about when they give examples and they're using the information that they literally are just teaching me to make examples out of them. They bring up examples, very complex examples that require you to be able to visualize what they're saying. But I'm like, I can't visualize what you're saying and write notes and try to understand what you're teaching me at the same time. Like, that's very, very hard for me to do. The way I was diagnosed, the evaluation comes with a report. And so within the report, she breaks down the various parts of executive functioning and other aspects of ADHD that she tested for. And one of the things I discovered is that I struggle with complex processing. So my complex processing speed is significantly lower than people my age, right? And so what that means is that when I'm in class and, for example, in organic chemistry, and she's talking about these atoms and drawing them with sticks and like the letters, and then she's like, visualize these molecules in this formation while they're interacting with another molecule in this formation, and she's teaching us a brand new concept, mind you, and I'm writing down notes, trying to focus on making sure that I have everything written down, and I'm supposed to visualize this thing that she's describing, and like be able to understand the example that she's giving in that moment. And y'all, I couldn't do it, but everyone around me was just like, yes, yeah, that makes sense. They were even asking questions, you guys. I shit you not, I was sitting there like, okay, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna make sure I look over this again and like understand this thing eventually, because no dice, like nothing was clicking, not a single thing. And it was in those moments that I was just like, dang, like, how are people doing this? Now I know. So that was just an aside on my struggles with science, upper level science classes. But that's just an example of how accommodations would have been useful. Oh, the next assumption is a nice one. The next assumption is you can tell how severe someone's ADHD is based on how they act around you. I promise you, I don't know anybody who suspected that I had ADHD. Not a single soul ever mentioned it, ever been like, hey, like, even joked about it. Like, that's why I didn't know about it for so long, like what it really is for so long. The hardest part about having ADHD and explaining it to people is that it's invisible. There's no way to like pull out your brain and be like, I have it, I have ADHD. There's no definite like brain scan that you can take or like a gene that you can test for that's like, yup, you have ADHD. It can be hard to come to terms with the fact that you have it and really like accept it. It's even harder to think about it as a disability because people around you are telling you that, oh, everybody struggles with this, everybody does this. Do you really have it? Even after seeing that video and then doing all that research, it was still hard to believe that I had it, and it was even harder to believe that to see it as a disability. Even after finding out what ADHD really is through that video and then doing research on it, it was still hard to come to terms with the fact that like I could have it. I had the symptoms, but a part of me wondered if I was looking for a cop-out or like an excuse. I don't know. Now it seems silly, but like that was my initial thought in the back of my head. And it took starting medication for me to really accept that I have it, and it's taken even longer to accept it as a disability. I think even after being on medication and seeing the change in myself and seeing how much better I'm doing on the medication, I still like, I feel reluctant. I'm working on it, but it's not something that comes easy. The last assumption that I'm going to address in this video is that we need to try harder, we don't want it bad enough, we just need more discipline, we just need to find a technique that will work for us, all of that jazz. I just want to say that like technique is very important. There are ways to do things when you have ADHD that will increase your success depending on what you're doing. But all in all, what I just listed, those things will not cure your ADHD. It will not help get rid of executive dysfunction. It just, like, even techniques just helps you manage it. No amount of trying harder would have quieted my mind. No amount of trying harder would have helped me focus the way I can do now. I did end up taking the MCAT, and I actually took it, I'm going to talk about it in the next video, but I took it on medication and I was able to focus the whole time. No amount of trying harder would have gotten me to where I am today, where I have wanted to be for a very long time, and I've worked really, really hard to try and get to where I am today. And the fact that it happened so quickly after I got on medication was mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing. It was a little sad because prior to starting medication and getting diagnosed, I used to believe that too. I used to think that I just need to try harder. I just need to do more. I need to find a different way to do things. I just need to do more. And I would do so much that I would not prioritize anything other than my goals. Like, for example, with school, like for the classes that I didn't do well in, I just need to try harder. I need to try harder. The next test, I would study. I would sit down and spend hours sitting down trying to focus, trying to study. I didn't see sitting down for 6 to 8 hours is trying hard enough, because during that 6 to 8 hours I was only really focusing for maybe three of them, and they were spread out throughout that 6 to 8 hours. But I didn't see that as trying hard enough. I thought that because I didn't achieve my goals, and because I didn't do well as I wanted to, that I wasn't trying hard enough, and that I needed to find a different method. And that is very, very damaging. It affected my self-efficacy, the way I saw myself, and what ended up happening is that I spent way too much time on homework and working. Had I been diagnosed earlier and started medication earlier, I think I would have had a more balanced college experience, in the sense that I would have gone out with my friends more often. I would have had time to do that. I would have had time to pursue other things that I enjoyed doing in high school, like volleyball and art, and I would have just been more involved in my community, in the things that I like to do, and I wouldn't have spent so much time on homework. At the end of the day, I feel like I did the best I could with the information that I had, so I'm not upset. I'm not regretful, because going back in time wouldn't change anything. I would still do everything the same way that I did it, with the information that I had. Now, if I had the option to go back with the information that I know now, I would definitely want to. But yes, you guys, that is it for this video. I hope that you learned something, or this was interesting. I debated making this video for a very long time, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to tell people in this way, if I wanted it to be out in the open like this, not because I was ashamed of it, but more so because I did not want to hear people's opinions on it, because I was afraid that they would be rooted in misinformation, assumptions, and stereotypes, and I knew that would have really bothered me, and so I hesitated, and so I didn't really want to tell anybody until now. Now I have this video that I can refer people to if they don't understand something about ADHD, or they have one of these assumptions. That'll be all for today, guys. Thank you for sticking around this long. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.